I'm not a professional colorist. I color grade in Adobe Premiere, which isn't the world's best coloring platform, but it's good enough for what I needed to do. Like, I'm not gonna be doing anything crazy. Like, you're gonna see in a second just how simple my process really is when it comes to color grading. So I have some of my favorite clips I've shot in 2020 here in my timeline, and we're gonna go through each of these one by one. So here we are in Adobe Premiere. And this first clip right here is from a commercial, a beer commercial that I shot in Mexico. This clip was shot from my Canon C200. It was shot in the RAW profile. And the one thing I like to do with the C200 RAW light profile is I don't like to color grade C-Log 2. Like, it's way too aggressive for me. So what I do is I go into my RAW settings of the clip and I change my color space to BT709, which is like a Rec 709 color space. And then my gamma, I change to Canon Log 3. Unless there's a clip that's blown out that I really need all that dynamic range, all that information, I typically, from experience, tend to shoot my shots properly. Like, I don't blow out anything in the process of shooting, so I'm able to work with a less aggressive curve, if you will. So the first thing that I usually do is I want to get my black and my white points right where they need to be. So to do that, first step I always do is I pull down saturation all the way. So the only thing I'm seeing are the grayscale white and blacks. And I come into my curves. I grab my black point, which is the bottom of this line, and I drag it right until my blacks reach a point where they're almost at 0 IRE. They're gonna be the darkest parts of my image. So just over here, or just about touching 0 IRE for our blacks. And my whites, I'm gonna bring them kind of close to the highest white point, the brightest part of the image. And now I'm going to come back to my basic correction where I pull down the saturation and bring back the saturation. Now I'm just going to dial back my blacks a little bit. They're clipping a touch. White balance is always kind of like a preference thing for me. I don't know if that's the right way to do things, but this image is looking a little blue for me, so I'm gonna add a little warmth in the color temperature. My image is looking a little contrasty, so I'm gonna pull the contrast back a little bit. Now my blacks are a little flat, so I'm gonna bring them back down. Now I'm gonna pull my highlights down a little bit, get a little bit smoother highlight roll off into the shadows. It's looking pretty good. Let's see where we're at. Look at that. That's like already looking solid, but let's see what else there is to do. So something that I always do is I come to my curves next. I come down to the luma versus saturation, and I put a point right about here. And so the tail end of this is the darkest parts of the image. So I want to take the saturation out of the blacks. I want my blacks to be black. This isn't the best way to do this, but this is the quickest and easiest way for someone like me to do this. So I put my point here and I bring the darkest parts of the image all the way to 0 saturation just to bring out any color in the blacks. And really, like, no one's even gonna notice this simple little step, but it's just something that I like to do just for my peace of mind, honestly. So after I do that, I come into my color wheels, and the color wheels are really the place where I find the look and like the creative style of my image, because there's like an endless possibilities of what you can do here. This is really where all the color grading happens, right here in the highlight, midtone, shadow color wheels. So for this image, I really wanted to feel like it's warm, like the sun is producing this nice, rich, warm feeling. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a little bit of warmth, a little bit of orangish yellow into the highlights and see where that's bringing us. Nice, I like that. So that's before. It's looking pretty blue, looking like a cooler night. Boom. That makes it feel like more like a night in Mexico, if you will. And then for midtones, I usually only really push a little bit of red into the midtones, because the midtones are gonna be where skin tones usually fall. And what I typically do with shadows is bring it the opposite direction that I brought the highlights, and what that's gonna do is cause a nice little bit of contrast and colors in your image. So since I brought my highlights towards the yellowish direction, I'm gonna pull my shadows in the exact opposite direction towards this like bluish region. So that looks nice. So before and after our color wheels, it's super subtle, but again, it gives us a nice little touch. Might come back up here, add a little more saturation to the image. Bring down the contrast a little bit. Gonna pull down my highlights a little bit more. Pull up my blacks a touch more. Touch more saturation. Honestly, like, that's it. Like, that's all I really want to do this clip. I don't want to overdo it. This is looking pretty good. This is before and this is after. Like a really nice looking clip. Like, it's already shot really well. There's already like cool compositions, a cool looking scene, so you don't really need to do too much to it. The worst thing that you can do when you're first starting out in color grading is do too much. Like, you already don't have a base, you don't have the eye developed, so the more you do to the image, the worse it's gonna look. So really just keep it simple. Like, I didn't do too much. Like, I didn't throw on any LUTs. Like, wasn't like pushing and pulling colors to the extremes. Cool, so before we move on, I'm actually gonna export all of these looks so that if you want them, you can check them out in my store below and you don't feel like going through this process. You can just use this one. But like, don't think just because it works on this clip, it's gonna work on yours. Like, it might not, it might. It's up to you, so. Gonna export this now. So for those of you who don't know already how to export a look or a LUT, you just go up to the Lumetri color panel here, click these like 3 little line things, go to export.cube, and let's call this Mexican sunset. And I'm going to hit save. That's it. Cool, so moving on to our next clip here. This is a scene from a short film that I shot. It's like this old guy just like screaming in a trailer. So again, this was shot on my Canon C200 in RAW profile, so I'm gonna do exactly what I did last time. I'm gonna make this into a more manageable codec to work with. So I'm going to go into my effect controls, gonna change my color space into the BT709, change my Canon log into Canon log 3. So gonna bring my black and white points to where I want them, pull the saturation down, go into my curves, move past it, grab my black point, drag it down to where we're close to 0. Then I'm gonna take my white point. You don't necessarily have to always take it up to the highest level or the lowest level. So I'm going to bring it to a point where I feel like it feels right. Gonna leave it just about there. It's like, what, 85 IRI. Gonna bring my saturation back, boom. Gonna pull my blacks up a little bit. They're clipping just a touch. So first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna bring down the contrast a little bit. It's super contrasty. When I do that though, I'm losing my deep blacks, so I'm gonna pull my blacks back down to a point where they touch. Gonna bring a little more saturation in. Gonna cool down our image. This clip's looking a little warm, so I'm gonna cool it down a bit just with my temperature here. And again, like, I use white balance to taste. I don't necessarily do it the right way, so I'm gonna pull it down to a point where I think it looks good. Next thing I'm gonna do, pull the saturation out of the blacks using this curve line. All right, so next are my color wheels. That's where I love to put my look onto things. This is where all the magic happens, inside the color wheels. So everything's looking pretty warm already. I don't know if I wanna add more warmth coming in through the windows. Let's see what it looks like when we cool down the highlights. That's pretty nice. Yeah, let's do that. Let's add a little bit of this color into our highlights. Cool it down a little bit. Add a little red into the mid-tones, which is gonna hit his skin tones. I think I like where the shadows are already, honestly. I'm not gonna mess with the shadows. I think it looks good. I'm gonna come back to our basic corrections, just make a couple minor tweaks, pull the contrast down again a little bit, take some of that harsh contrast out there. Maybe add a little more saturation. So I'm actually gonna pull some of the yellow out here. I'm gonna find that color using my eyedropper here. Touch it right there. Find these 2 points. Just bring some of that like deranged yellow just like out of the clip a little bit. That's doing a whole lot. It's pretty nice. Now that I did that though, I feel like the highlights are a little too cool. So I'm gonna come back here and just dial this back a little bit. Might pull the contrast down just a touch more. There we go. Maybe the highlights down. I think it's looking great. This is before. This is after. I'm really liking the look of this. And yeah, again, for all the people who don't feel like going through this process themselves, I'm gonna quick export this look for you and drop it into my store down below. Export.cube. Old man trailer. Getting real creative with these names tonight. Next clip. Speaking of the devil, he was texting us earlier. This is a scene from a music video I shot with Noah Guy. We're out in the field, we're using sunlight as our natural light, bouncing this light back with a gold reflector. 709, gamma, we're gonna go Canon Log 3, exposed properly. There's a nice balance between the highlights and the shadows. Take the saturation all the way down so we can work with our black point. Go into the curves, grab our black point, bring it way down, all the way to just about when it's touching 0 IRE. Just gonna give it some breathing room. Gonna pull this up just a touch, kind of like where the highlights are already. Sweet. Bring back the saturation. It's looking a little contrasty for me. I might actually just pull our blacks back just a touch. And Noah's shirt in this case is white, so I'm gonna take my white balance selector, touch his shirt. Okay. Don't love how warm that made it, so I'm gonna pull that back a little bit. I'm just gonna pull it all the way back to 0. Didn't like what that was doing. First thing I'm gonna do, bring in some saturation. It's looking about right. And again, like all this is like, just like you get used to like taste, like you know how much saturation to pull back in just because you've done this 100 times. It's looking a little contrasty, so I'm gonna dial our contrast back a bit. That's looking good. Gonna bring my highlights down a little bit, give us a smoother roll off. Looking like good levels right there. Maybe add a little more saturation here. So this music video in particular was like really like otherworldly. So bring out those colors and that saturation. Gives it a nice touch. A little more saturation. Cool, I'm liking that. Gonna come in the curves, take the color out of the blacks. Probably not doing anything, but we're gonna do it anyway. Color wheels, so where magic happens. I don't really know what I want, so I'm just gonna play around here. Start with the highlights. See what that's doing. Not a ton. Gonna add some red into the midtones. I think that looks good, right? Does that look good? I don't know. Looks good to me. I'm gonna pull my highlights a little more blue. There we go. That's looking good. So next thing I want to do, I want to make the grass kind of stand out a little more from the yellowish orange look of Noah's outfit that's got going on. I'm gonna come down to my hue versus hue, click on our grass color, and I want to bring my grass and make it a little more bluish green than yellow. I feel like that's really pulling Noah out in the image a little bit more. So the next thing I want to do, I want to increase the color of the blue in the sky. I want to give it a little more saturation, a little more like not realism type look, a little more fairy tale-ish. Hue versus saturation. Pull up the saturation in the sky a bit. Pull Noah away from this image, let him stand out a little bit more. I want to take some of the focus away from what's in the foreground here and put your attention just totally on Noah. So what I like to do is kind of create a gradient of darkness that leads from the bottom of the frame up. So to do that, I'm going to create an adjustment layer. Gonna drop that over top of my clip. So on that adjustment layer, I'm going to bring down the exposure. As you can see, it's darkening the whole image. I don't want that, so I'm gonna come into Effect Controls. And then on my Lumetri control little color thing, I'm gonna click this little like eclipse circle thing. And so that's going to bring whatever I do over here on this side of my control panel, it's gonna happen all within this area. So I'm gonna make this super big, feather it out a whole bunch, bring it up. And now I'm able to essentially make a power window that you would have in DaVinci Resolve here in Adobe Premiere. So I'm gonna adjust this to my liking here. Look how much that's doing. Isn't that really cool? It might be a little much. I'm gonna pull it down. But before, after. It's just kind of taking like the bright hot spot out of the grass in front of Noah and drawing your eye more toward where you want the viewer's eye to be. Pretty much all I'm gonna do to this clip. I think it looks great. Here's the before and here's the after. And then our very last clip here is an anamorphic shot. This is not from my Canon C200. This is from the Blackmagic Ursa Mini. I'm not really used to working with this profile. Don't really know the ins and outs, but I'm just gonna work with however it is, however it showed up as soon as I put it into the timeline. So first thing I'm gonna do, like all the other clips, I'm gonna pull down the saturation all the way, find my black point, and bring that down to 0 IRE, or at least close to it. Ursa Mini profiles are really nice. I kind of like them more than my C200, honestly. Not gonna do anything with my white points. I think they're already as high as they need to be. Gonna bring my saturation back. So I remember when I shot this with a really super cool color balance temperature. I wanted things to feel like real icy and like secluded. And I think the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna bring some of that warmth back. It's a little too blue for me. So right there is looking nice. Pull down my contrast just a touch. Pull down my highlights just a touch, get a nice smoother bit of roll off. Gonna come in my color wheels here. I think I'm gonna, yeah. The color here is looking a little purpley. So I'm gonna move that towards the greenish blue. That's nice right there, I think. So I'm gonna keep it there. I'm gonna come back up to my basic corrections. Ooh, forgot to take the color out of the blacks. Wasn't doing anything, but here we are. I'm gonna come back to the top here, bring down my highlights a little more. Get this a little smoother highlight roll off. I'm gonna bring the warmth down, bring back some of that core temperature. Add a little green in there. I don't think I want to do anything else. I think if I do anything else, it'll ruin it. And I think it looks cool the way it is. It's an awesome frame. This is before our color grading, and this is after our color correction, color grading. Yeah, so I'll export this look for you if you want it. It's not gonna be free just because I work hard at what I do. Yeah, like there was no like secret formula to what I was just doing there. Like nothing really super unique or super technically difficult about that color grading situation. Most of it is just based off of personal taste and kind of just like what I've developed over color grading millions and millions of clips over the past few years. So I hope you're leaving this feeling a little bit more confident as you work your way into the color grading world. Yeah, thanks for watching as always. I love you.